Today we're unboxing an iPhone 7 that should be running its original software version, iOS 10. This was only $25 on eBay, but unfortunately it does have a cracked screen. So let's go ahead and get this opened up. So here is the iPhone. This screen is cracked pretty badly. It almost looks like something might have fallen on the top of it there. And this back panel looks decent at first glance, but in the light, it looks like it was kept in some sort of case that left an imprint on it. Let's see if it has any battery power. Looks like it does. And we boot here into the iOS 10 setup screen. So this is what I saw in the listing photos, and it was how I was able to tell this was on iOS 10. So this font here in the middle is a thinner version of Apple's San Francisco font. In the iOS 11 setup screen, it was changed to a thicker version of that. And another giveaway that this was iOS 10 is that battery icon in the top right. So this battery has a very thin outline, and this was changed to a thicker design with iOS 11. So we'll go through this setup now. And here we go. Let's see the iOS 10 home screen. And there it is. One of the biggest giveaways that this is iOS 10 is just the default wallpaper. This green wave was the default for iOS 10. Let's jump into settings and see which version of iOS 10 we have. Okay, looks like we have 10.2.1 here, and this is a base model 32GB unit. Here's another look at the cracked display on this device. So in most cases, it wouldn't really make sense to replace the display on this device. But because it's running its original version of iOS, I definitely want to get it fixed up. So because I prefer original Apple parts on my devices, I actually just ordered another iPhone 7. I found one on eBay for only $10.50 plus shipping. I assume it will be iCloud locked because it was listed as 4 parts or not working, but the housing and display look to be in really great condition. So when that device comes in, I will get the logic board of this iOS 10 iPhone 7 swapped in. Okay, well my replacement iPhone 7 has finally arrived. My assumption was correct as this ended up being iCloud locked. But thankfully it has really good battery health and it seems to be in great condition. So it's a perfect candidate to swap the iOS 10 logic board into. The repair process for this iPhone 7 ended up being a bit harder than I imagined. The first challenge I faced was removing the displays. The display on this iPhone is glued down with really strong adhesive. So I had to apply heat to the screens and then use suction cups to get them removed. Another obstacle with this iPhone was the use of Y000 screws. And for some reason, these screws kept stripping out for me. I actually went through 3 different Y000 screwdrivers on this project. I'm not sure if that's a common issue or if I just kept getting low quality screwdrivers. I eventually found a screwdriver that worked, and it was nice to have the iCloud locked iPhone that I wasn't worried about putting back together, as I could pull some extra screws from that one to replace the stripped out ones. I used an iFixit guide, which was really great for walking you through each individual step. And here is the finished product. The iPhone 7 is looking incredible now. And it's made such a transformation from what it looked like at the beginning of the video. It's been working perfectly for me, and I did make sure to swap over the home button to retain Touch ID functionality. I did notice during the repair that this iOS 10 logic board actually had the moisture indicators turned red. So at least some amount of moisture has made its way to this logic board before. But I haven't noticed any functional issues at all. The only part of the repair that I really skipped out on was the display adhesive. So because I didn't apply that around the edge of the display, the iPhone won't be as waterproof. With that repair out of the way, let's now talk about what the iPhone 7 was. So this iPhone 7 was released alongside the iPhone 7 Plus in September 2016. And these models were really significant in Apple's history. They were the first iPhone models to remove the 3.5mm headphone jack. Apple infamously cited the reason courage for doing this. They did include a set of wired earpods with a lightning connector in the box. And to further aid with the transition, they included a lightning to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter. But I think we all know Apple's real reasoning for removing the headphone jack was to boost sales for the wireless AirPods. And it was definitely a shock to the industry back in 2016, but of course became accepted over time. time. The iPhone 7 was also the first flagship non-S model iPhone that did not receive a new design. Apple had been in a rhythm really since 2009 of releasing a new iPhone one year and then releasing an S model the following year that made incremental improvements upon that. But the iPhone 7 here did not bring an all-new design. It still looked really similar to the 2014 and 15 iPhone 6 and 6S. So the iPhone 7 shared the same rounded corner design as those previous models. There were visual differences, of course, like the cameras as well as the new antenna design. But the general footprint and design was the same. It is important to note that the first generation iPhone SE shared a design with the iPhone 5S. But I'm not including that in my statement here just because that was a budget-oriented option, so it makes more sense that it shared a previous design. So you can definitely trace Apple's tendency to hold onto iPhone designs for more than 2 years here to this iPhone 7. This iPhone had a new capacitive home button. So where the home button would physically click inward on the 6S, it was a replicated click on the iPhone 7 with the Taptic engine. This took some getting used to at first, as the home button would just basically vibrate when you pressed it. Along with that new home button came a more advanced Taptic engine. So there were now more system haptics, say when you pull down the notification center or slide up on the control center. And also in places like clock when scrolling through these lists. The iPhone 7 models were the first to be IP67 water and dust resistant. The rear-facing camera was still 12 megapixels, but it was physically much larger than what the iPhone 6S had. And there was now optical image stabilization on both models rather than being exclusive to the Plus model. There was now a quad flash instead of a dual flash. But the real camera improvement was on the iPhone 7 Plus, which gained an extra lens. The extra lens on the 7 Plus enabled the new portrait mode feature. And the front-facing camera was now 7 megapixels instead of 5. And this was the first iPhone with stereo speakers. The ear speaker at the top of the device now acted as a second speaker, making for much louder and more balanced sound. And though the displays on the iPhone 7 and 7 Plus were the same size and resolution at 4.7 and 5.5 inches, they were now slightly brighter. This iPhone was powered by the new A10 Fusion chip. It was clocked at around 2.3 gigahertz, and it was actually a quad-core chip, with 2 efficiency cores and 2 performance cores. iPhones had been using dual-core chips since the 2011 iPhone 4S, so this was a big improvement. Although it is important to mention that the A10 Fusion on the iPhone 7 did not use all 4 cores at once. The 7 stuck to the 2 gigabytes of RAM that the iPhone 6S lineup had. But the 7 Plus here actually bumped that to 3 gigabytes. This iPhone launched in 5 color options. You could get the standard black color here, which was a matte black finish. You could also get a really unique high gloss jet black finish, as well as silver, gold, or rose gold. Apple added a 6th color option in spring 2017 with the product red model. And that color option looked really incredible with the silver accents and white front bezel. This model bumped the base storage capacity to 32 gigabytes instead of 16. You could also get 128 gigabyte or 256 gigabyte models. And the pricing for these models started at $649. The 7 dropped in price in 2017 and 2018 until it was discontinued altogether with the iPhone 11 release in fall 2019. And now let's take a second to talk about iOS 10 on this iPhone specifically. This was the first release to ditch the classic slide to unlock feature, instead replacing that with press home to open. And that was done because sliding on the lock screen now brought up this widget view. iOS 10 also brought the raise to wake feature. And this was really nice for the iPhone 6S and 7 as they had second generation Touch ID sensors. And although that sounds kind of unrelated, if you had Touch ID set and you would just click the home button, it would actually unlock the device so quickly that you couldn't see your notifications. So raising to wake instead gave you a chance to read those. iOS 10 was the last version to feature support for 32-bit applications. And it featured a very unique look for the control center, with With iOS 7 through 9, everything was on one page. But here in iOS 10, the controls were split between two panes, with your music here on the secondary pane and the more basic controls on the first. I actually really enjoyed this control center design, but it was very short-lived, only being present in this version. It was replaced with a design that's still very similar to what we have today in iOS 11. This home application to control your smart home accessories was new for this version. And the Game Center application was no longer present on the home screen. You could access it in settings instead. You could now collaborate with others in the Notes application. And the Messages app got some cool upgrades. There was now an app store within the Messages application. I remember this being really popular for downloading games that you could play with others. Starting with iOS 10.2 here in the US, there was now a TV application instead of the classic Videos app. And now let's take a look at the default wallpaper selection on this version of iOS 10. So first you had the dynamic category. These were carried over from iOS 7. The stills category on this version, unfortunately, is a bit boring. So there's only 18 images here to choose from. As I mentioned, the green wave was the default, but you also had default wallpapers for iOS 9 as well as iOS 8. I believe these three images here on the second row were actually exclusive to the iPhone 7. So these kind of looked like orbs. You had a blue option as well as pink and a yellow. You also had these planets from iOS 9 as well as these kind of like chalk bursts. And lastly, you had 6 options for gradient images. The last category here is pretty interesting. So these live wallpapers use the pressure-sensitive 3D touch layer in the display. All 9 of these had launched with the iPhone 6s models. So you had these beta fish where you could apply force to the screen and they would actually animate. And you also had these 3 near the bottom that kind of resembled like smoke or clouds. Personally, I think I'm going to go with one of these wallpapers that was exclusive to the iPhone 7. I think this blue option looks especially nice. So that pretty much concludes my look at this iPhone 7 running its original software version, iOS 10.2.1. I'm really glad that I got this iPhone taken from a very unfortunate condition at the beginning of the video to looking nearly perfect now. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts on this project. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.